Okay, let's start the first questions about your book. Your first book titled The Montessori Toddler, and after that, The Montessori Baby, and now The Montessori Child. And maybe many parents here are curious, why did you first choose the Montessori education for your children? And why do you think Montessori is so important? Maybe we can start from Simone.
Sure. I think like many Montessori educators, I've discovered Montessori myself when my children were small and we were looking for a school. Oliver's now 23 and Emma's 22, and they got to go to Montessori school up until 12 years old. We have it here in the Netherlands where I live, but I'm originally from Australia, and they started going to Montessori school there. And the reason I chose it was when we were looking for a preschool, you walked into the classroom and everything was so calm and inviting, and the materials are laid out beautifully. When I got to observe a class of children, they were all busy working, doing all these different things, really challenging activities. Some of the children with letters and some children doing some cleaning things, making bracelets, doing lots of creative things as well. And there was just a diverse activity, but no one seemed to be telling any of the children what to do. These children were independently wanting to do this amazing work. So I think that's why I chose Montessori, because I thought this is something I would have loved when I was a child, to have this hands-on learning opportunity. And I think that in the big picture, Montessori is so important because it helps to raise children who are able to look after themselves, look after the environment, and look after others, as well as, be able to solve problems for themselves, think creatively. And these are the kind of skills that our children need in this very unknown future. But I'd love to hear what, Junnifa, how you chose your school for your children as well, or how you came to Montessori, which is earlier than your children.
Yeah. Well, I had the similar experience. I happened to visit a Montessori school before I had children. I think it was early. I had just gotten married, and my mom, who's a teacher, was visiting a school, and I went with her. And I was just blown away by the independence of the children, the beauty of the classroom, even the guide who gave us the tour, her grace and the way that she related with us just really spoke to me. And so I decided to learn more. I decided to take a workshop. I took the workshop, but I wanted to know even more. And then I took the 0 to 3 training. And by the time I took the 0 to 3 training, I was really excited to start having children so I could implement what I was learning with them. So I had my son right after the 0 to 3 training, and I tried to implement so much of what I had learned. And it really made parenting amazing for me. It was so different from everything that I had expected. And I just kept wanting to know more. And so as my children grew, I would take the 3 to 6 training. I went on to take the 6 to 12 training. And just being a Montessori parent it makes parenting truly feel like a joyful experience. And so that has been my Montessori journey.
Yeah, I do agree with you. And I also did my Montessori parenting to my son, and I do really enjoy it. Okay, and how to support our child at every age groups based on the Montessori, because it's separated from 3 to 6 and 6 to 12. So how to support our child at every age groups?
That's a huge question because there's so many parts of our child's development. There's their social development, their cognitive development, there's their emotional development, and all of those things. But I guess what we use in Montessori is a framework that Dr. Montessori developed called the 4 planes of development. And what you have is she recognized that the characteristics of children were very similar in these planes of development. So the first plane is from 0 to 6 years, and the characteristics are quite similar for those children. From 6 to 12, again, similar characteristics. 12 to 18, and 18 to 24. And we should add that actually there is a chapter in the book about what's coming next, and it covers adolescence and the 12 to 18 years. But basically what we see then as how we can support our child at every age is to understand what are the characteristics of the children between 0 to 6. Okay, well, these children are sensorial learners, which means that they learn best by touching, feeling, smelling, seeing, hearing, tasting everything, which means that putting them in front of a screen or talking to them about abstract things that aren't right in front of them, or fantasy instead of reality, they're not going to learn it so easily. They also are interested in developing movement. It's so important for them they go from being a baby and they rely on their back or on their stomach where we place them, to being a child that can move, and then they move from 3 to 6 into refining some of those movements. And so we can support them to become, so just taking those two characteristics, for example, you can support your child by providing lots of movement opportunities from 0 to 3, it'll be things like climbing and swinging and riding, and well, actually it depends. Like a baby obviously is on a movement mat, and then from a toddler they have those bigger skills, and then more refinement as they get to 3 to 6 year olds. So they might learn to do skipping or skipping with a rope. They might like to learn to hop. They might start to play sports or to kick balls, and there's even a Montessori program for developing sport. And then as our child moves into the 6 to 12 years, the characteristics of the child change again in this second plane of development. And these children are more social. They were social already. They were becoming part of their community in the first 6 years, but really it takes off in the 6 to 12 years. So how can we support their social development? We can provide a school that is encouraging of social relationships, gives time for children to be with other children of their age, but also peers who are older and younger than them, which is also really nice. We give them tools how to solve conflict, so that they're not, rather than us always deciding or punishing or those kind of things, we're actually there to guide the children in conflict situations so that they can then start to take over those things more by themselves. And then other big part of the 6 to 12 year olds is making agreements with the children, because you might already have noticed that if you've got a child who is 5.5 to 6 moving into this second plane of development, they don't just want to hear what we have to say. We really want to come up with agreements as a family together, and then they're more likely to stick to the agreements because they were a part of it. So there are a few things that come to mind as you support them at every age and every stage. But Junnifa, would you like to add some things that you think of?
Yes, I think preparing the environment for your child at each plane, which is something that we talk about in the book, preparing the environment, modifying the environment to mirror their needs or to serve their needs, and as well as to fit their interests. So that observing, which again we talk about, is one way that you can support your children, because when you observe them, you get to understand them more. And I love in one of Dr. Montessori's book, she talks about how the more you observe something, the more you fall in love with it, because you start to notice things, you start to understand it more, you connect with it. So I think we can always support our children, regardless of what plane they are in, by observing them and then responding to them based on what we observe. And then also by caring for ourselves, because, you know, when you take care of yourself, then you're in a better situation to respond to your child. If you're tired or your own needs are not being met, then you might struggle with meeting your child. So I think, like, when we take care of ourselves, we can also support that. We're inadvertently supporting our children. So those are some of the ways that I think, regardless of what plane your child is, you can support them by doing those things.
Okay, that's a very good point. So, Andita mau bertanya langsung?
Yeah, hello. Thank you. Can I ask a question? Thank you, Simon and Junnifa, to write this beautiful book, and thank you for the time to sharing with us about this Montessori journey. What I want to ask is how to be consistent to apply this Montessori method, because sometimes we we must face difficulties, sometimes because actually I have applied Montessori method in my first child when her is in the toddler stage, but and then I found a difficulty with my mental health and some kind of like that. So right now I feeling very guilty about that, and I want to restart to apply the Montessori, and I want to be more consistent about it, because I have the second daughter, and how to be consistent. And I think this is in line with the question. Maybe Rosa missed this question from Dian Miraswati. She asks about will it consistent application of method or environment give bad influence to kids' development? Because she said that she is a full-time working mom, so she have like limit time to maintain Montessori activity in everyday too. That's all. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, well, I touched on it. I actually did touch on the consistent limits just in the last question as well, about being consistent when you're not working on things. And I understand that we have things happen in our lives, like mental health and those kind of things, and I hope that you're feeling better. But we can just forgive ourselves that we couldn't be consistent and that we're going to start again. So again, like, it's never too late to start Montessori, and it's never too late to pick up Montessori again. So don't give yourself a hard time. I think what I love about the book, it's very accessible. It's written so that, you know, if you're a busy parent, you know, there's nice lists and things like this that you can read. It's very beautiful to read and that kind of thing. So open up a page and say, this is what the area I'm going to focus on. Or you can think about a part of your day that's more difficult. So I was speaking today with a parent, and they are having a hard time at mealtime, but they're also not being very predictable. So sometimes they let their child walk away from the table, and other times they make the child sit at the table until they're finished. And so if we aren't consistent, I don't like that word, but if we're not predictable, then our child also doesn't know what to expect, and there are going to be more battles. So it can sometimes be nice to have a meeting with yourself or with your parenting partner, if you have one, to say, how are we going to approach it? Because how I set up my mealtime is going to be different to how you set up your mealtime. And so I think that I focus on maybe one area at a time to get back into. It might be mealtime, or it might be getting dressed, or it might be bedtime. Start with the rhythms of your day and build them back in. When you're busy at work, you know, maybe that's not the time to start again. Maybe start on the weekends, but then try and remember the ways that you communicate with your child, so that even when you're busy and you're trying to rush out the door, you give them, you know, an opportunity to try and put their shoes on by themselves and to get their bag ready for school and things like that as well.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I will add to that is that small steps, you know, just small steps, a little every day. You don't have to try to, I mean, like, sometimes you might feel like, oh, I want to be a Montessori parent, so I have to do everything, set up the environment, and the children have to do this. Like, we're trying to do everything at the same time. I feel like we can start with little steps. And like Simone said, you might want to start with, what is your most difficult, like, what do you struggle with the most, you know? Or maybe it's just like, even that, if that feels difficult, even just starting with connecting with your child and taking things a little bit slower and just being kind to yourself. So I feel, forgive yourself, like Simone said, and then don't try to overhaul your entire life or overhaul your entire parenting process. Take a little step. What little step will you do? What little Montessori will you do today? And acknowledge yourself when you're successful at it, you know? That's the only thing that I will add. Be kind to yourself.
And Iwang, you can directly ask.
Yes, thank you, Miss. Good evening, Simon and Junnifa. I'm a father. I have one daughter and one son. I have buy your books of very amazing but maybe I wanna ask you, what do you think about what should the father first before giving Montessori to application in my children, maybe, because I read this book, maybe before we can apply to our children. I have to educate about Montessori method. I think what do you think about father like me to know about this Montessori method before we apply to my children, maybe. It's like I wanna how about because I have a case, I always to teach my son and my daughter.
I think it's lovely that you're asking, what can a dad do, you know? And I love that you're on the call and wanting to be proactive. I have many fathers that come to my classes as well, and they have similar insights. I think the biggest skill is observation, really to see your child, because we come with a lot of stories and expectations of our children, and we're better to kind of leave them on the side so we can really see who our child is. And because you have two children, you already know they're very different, right? And they have different needs at different ages and stages, and because their interests are different and how they learn is different. So I think that if you even took 5 minutes with a little note card like this kind of size, and you just sat to observe your child, write what you see, not what you think. So I'm writing that, my son is sitting on the couch and he's rolling a ball with his feet backwards and forwards. And then you could talk about, then he turns to his sister and he says such and such and such and such. You just write it down until you filled the whole card. Then once you filled the card, then you're allowed to think. Then you're like, did I learn anything new about my children? Did I learn anything new about myself? Would I set up the home environment differently? Because I noticed that, they started kicking the ball along the thing. So maybe we should have a place where the ball goes when we get in from the playground so that they can get in the house. Is there any skills that they need to build in this moment? So, for example, they started arguing. Can I help children build the skills of scaffolding those conflict resolution skills? And that, if you practice that every day or at least once a week, you would see that you're beginning to apply Montessori more and more, because you step back to see, observe, and then you can respond rather than react.